Mr. President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country. And because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out? Because we have $14 trillion now invested, committed to investing when Biden didn't have practically anything. This country was dying. You know, we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. I went to Saudi Arabia. The king told me. He said, you got the hottest we have the hottest country in the world right now. 6 months ago, this country was stone cold dead. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that.
Welcome back, everybody. Sean and Jules here. I hope everybody had a very good Memorial Day weekend. I guess we should just jump right into this.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because the thing that has been on my mind for the past couple of days has been the absolute shit show of delivering humanitarian aid in Gaza. You know, we're at, I don't know, what is this, month 20? 19?
Oh, of the whole war since October 7th?
Yeah. I mean, something like that, of this mass murder campaign that Netanyahu has been executing. I guess that's the word, executing.
Yeah, that's the one. Currently over 50,000 people.
And then the last 3 months or so, where he has instituted a total blockade on any aid coming into Gaza. And, you know, I saw somewhere that they're basically consuming a few hundred calories a day. That's all they have access to in food. And, you know, because everything has run out.
For reference, that's not even a small bag of potato chips that you get on the side with a sandwich.
Clearly, you can't survive off of this. And the UN and human rights organizations have been calling out this mass starvation, which, you know, I hate to cite the rules, but is against the Geneva Convention and the Treaty of Rome, talking about collective punishment.
Yeah, not only collective punishment, but also starving populations.
Exactly. Both. Specifically.
And targeting aid workers.
And that's another aspect to it, is deliberately going after aid workers and people who are trying to deliver aid. And all of this is from the very beginning, Netanyahu specifically, but Israel's absolute fucking hatred of UNRWA and demonizing them as being collaborators with Hamas based on mostly non-existent evidence. And anytime that there was something that was substantiated, it was in such a roundabout, circuitous way, the connection between a particular staff person and some member of Hamas.
It's the Oprah Winfrey distribution system of Hamas. You're Hamas. You get a Hamas. Right. Yeah, you get a Hamas.
Everybody look under your chairs. Because it would be like
grandma's Hamas, the dog Hamas, everybody's Hamas.
It would be somebody's cousin or something like that was Hamas, and so that means that this aid worker is connected now.
Yeah, they were born under the Hamas moon sign, so they're clearly guilty by birth.
That's the 13th house. Directly challenging the UN's role in Gaza, because, you know, Israel was successful in getting UNRWA basically out of Gaza, which also prompted the US, UK, and Germany to suspend any funding for UNRWA. I mean, and that on its own just completely hamstrings their ability to deliver aid, aside from Israel's blockade. So challenging the UN's role in Gaza is the newly formed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And I mean, this is just like the ugliest name already. And as soon as I came across this, I had just been reading about King Leopold, the Belgian King Leopold's activities in the Congo.
His shenanigans in the Congo.
And what he did there, it was like, oh my God.
His wily antics.
This is like, the whole thing is just like such a similar sort of deal, because he created this like totally fake humanitarian, it was like Friends of the Congo or something like that organization, to go in and sort of like, you know, this is the 19th century. So they're talking about, you know, civilizing the Congolese people. You know, so they use language like that. It just sounded so damn similar, this. And now what's going on with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is not quite as terrible as what King Leopold got up to, which is...
Notably, King Leopold was committing some of the most atrocious acts of torture and mass killing.
A lot of people call this like the first modern genocide, what King Leopold was doing in the Congo.
What resources was he having them collect? That
rubber, because
was
of rubber trees.
Okay.
Yeah. And rubber was becoming a much more important commodity across the world. And it was extremely, its value had gone up quite a bit, mainly because is being used for automobile tires, which was a brand new thing.
Yeah.
You know, so we're talking like 1850s, I think, something like that. But that whole process was just a mess, because you couldn't get all the way upriver on boats to where the rubber trees were. You had to go up a certain way or a certain distance, and then basically take the boats apart, carry them overland, and then put them back in the water after you passed this area that boats couldn't travel through. And all of that was done with slave labor. I mean, they didn't call it that, but it was. And, you know, they used different names because all of that, like the colonialism and everything, had really gone out of fashion. It was not as popular as it had been.
Well, the brutality to ensure that everybody's working hard reminded me right away of Cortez, who would cut off the hands of indigenous peoples if they didn't find enough gold.
But see, that's the thing, is that's the kind of thing you could get away with 200 years earlier. You couldn't get away with it in the 1800s in the same way. You had
He's
to
just retro.
You had to mask it, which is why he came up with like this organization.
Yeah.
You know, which was allegedly humanitarian, and call it that. And I don't know. The whole thing is was completely gross. I mean, one of the worst people just ever, not even of the 19th century, just period. You know, like just a creepy man who did absolutely horrible things. And anyway, that's what has been on my mind as soon as I came across the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which isn't that much better than what King Leopold was doing. So registered in Delaware, it's technically an NGO, even though it has been like completely backed by the Trump administration and the Israeli government. I mean, this is definitely a component of Israel's final solution for the Gazans.
He claims that he's restricting aid, and that the total blockade is to ensure that Hamas doesn't get their hands on the aid.
Right, that's the alleged reason. Steal it. Something which has never happened.
The problem is, we're not talking about shipments of arms here. It's not crates and crates of grenades. We're talking about food. That's the issue at hand, which also, to bring it back to the war crimes thing, that's the whole point of making it a war crime to deprive populations of food and to target aid workers. Is it doesn't matter if it might get in the hands of Hamas. because you're not supposed to starve your enemy anyways. Because that's a fucking war crime, even if they're trying to starve Hamas.
And one of the things that is like a normal, like, not normal, like it's good, but typical outcome is when there is a food shortage, yeah, it does end up getting collected in the hands of the people who have the power in the area. The food does. And it allows them to have control over the population because they're the ones they're giving access to the food.
It's also literally the only quasi-government in the area. I mean, ostensibly government. I mean, I say that almost in air quotes here, but if it's literally the only one, there's no one else that you could refer to as saying this hospital is owned by the government, and if the government is Hamas, then everything's Hamas. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the doctor is strapping an AK-47 on his back and going out and fighting with the Israeli forces.
Something else.
It just means it's part of the government. What?
Something else that has never happened.
Something else that has never fucking happened.
So let's talk a little bit about this organization and who's at least on paper behind it and some of their background. So this is from the New York Times. Supporters of the project describe it as an independent and neutral initiative run mainly by American contractors.
I remember when we were sending American contractors into the Middle East last time.
Yeah.
We're not talking
about the guys who build your house.
Although when it was Iraq, it was the guys who also built houses.
The main group providing security is run by Philip F. Riley, a former senior CIA officer, and the fundraising group is headed by Jake Wood, a former U.S. Marine, who said in an interview that the system would be phased in soon. So they cooked all this up in late 2023, basically right after the Hamas attack across the border into Israel settlements. Announcing the arrangement in early May, Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, said it was wholly inaccurate to call it an Israeli plan. But the project is an Israeli brainchild, first proposed by Israeli officials in the earliest weeks of the war, according to Israeli officials. Nice writing, Times. People involved in the initiative and others familiar with its conception who spoke on condition of anonymity to speak more freely of the initiative. The New York Times found that the broad contours of the plan were first discussed in late 2023 at private meetings of like-minded officials, military officers, and business people with close ties to the Israeli government. This gets better. As a young CIA operative in the 1980s, Mr. Riley had helped train the Contras, right-wing militias fighting Nicaragua's Marxist government. So yes, this is the same Contras. He was just lending a hand. The same Contras as in the Iran-Contra affair. According to a 2022 podcast interview, 2 decades later, he was one of the first U.S. agents to land in Afghanistan after the September 11 attacks. According to the interview, he became the CIA station chief in Kabul, then left to work as a private security expert for groups including Orbis, a Virginia-based consulting firm. You're a consulting firm in Virginia. Yeah.
Yeah. We know what you're consulting.
We know what it is definitely. Yeah. It's not the marketing plan.
Yeah. The consulting is going through his Rolodex of friends in nefarious places.
Right. How much oil can we get a hold of? How many people can we kill? How many poppies can we grow? That's the consulting. It was in this capacity that Mr. Riley liaised with Israeli military and intelligence officials to develop new models for food distribution in Gaza. According to a document produced by Orbis in late 2024, while working for Orbis, Mr. Riley worked on a study that outlined a more detailed version of the plan to outsource food aid delivery to private companies and foundations, according to the document. Now, keep in mind, UNRWA had been successfully doing this for a decade?
I guess
2 decades?
Yeah.
And without incident, just able to deliver aid.
Really, the problem that is typically lobbed at the United Nations is not their effectiveness as a peacekeeping force or as a military. That's not usually the complaint that's lodged against the United Nations.
Right.
If you see the blue helmets, You're still on your own. But one thing that the UN has done successfully is deliver food.
Food and medicine.
Yeah.
So you'd think, like, instead of like coming up with your own plan, and you just like, even if you wanted to use private contractors, if you were going to really try to do this and not just bullshit it, you would just do what they did.
Yeah.
There's your plan. Whatever they'd been doing, just do that, but with your own private.
You can copy off of their notes. It's an open book test.
I bet they would even tell you.
They would tell you.
I bet they'd come over and say, like, do it like this.
Don't do what you're doing.
Last November, Mr. Riley's representatives registered 2 such entities in the United States, SRS and GHF, according to people familiar with the move. SRS began to operate in Gaza in 2025, with Mr. Riley as chief executive. During a ceasefire that ran from January until March, the firm's contractors staffed a central Gaza checkpoint that screened Palestinian cars for weapons. In a statement, SRS said it had no Israeli shareholders or interests. Whatever.
Okay.
I mean, okay. That's
you see how that's worse, right?
Honestly, that's a crazy thing to even say. Like, why would you even say that? Like, still, the effort was seen in Israel as a small scale trial for a future security model that could be rolled out more widely. So the GHF's Gaza Humanitarian Fund, even though it's been in existence as an organization since the beginning of this year, their first operation was on this past May 26th. So just 4 days ago. We're recording this on the 30th. And basically what they did is they set up a heavily secured food distribution center in Rafah, which is in southern Gaza. Israel had been moving everybody into northern Gaza. So they all had to travel on foot mostly to the south. And it went predictably awful. Like, one, they didn't bring the food to where the people were. They made them travel to go get it, which created its own problems. And if you want to imagine how badly this went, you can basically just imagine a bunch of Blackwater contractors and special forces burnouts handing out Lunchables. But I want to back up a little bit.
Meanwhile, Israel has been for this entire time doing a musical chairs approach to how they inform the civilians of Gaza what to do. They'll say, go to this area and get out of this area because we're going to do some operations here. And then they burn down the area that they say to go to anyways, so it doesn't really fucking matter anyways.
And really all this notification ahead of time is just the most like tacit compliance with war crimes conventions. You know, where they let the civilian population know they issue some kind of an announcement that they're going to have an operation in an area. And then, like you just said, Jules, like they might shoot up stuff in the place they just sent everybody to. But what they get to do,
they'll also shoot people on the way out.
That's the other thing. And like, yes, but then what they get to do is they get to say, we notified everybody that they need to leave. So then they get to claim that anybody who remains is an enemy fighter. And because they just, once they announce that you have to evacuate an area, they turn that into a free fire zone where anything that moves is a legitimate target. I mean, I watched a video of this, of an old man, like kind of just stumbling. I saw this morning, and a drone dropped a fucking bomb on him. There's a guy just walking, and then there's nobody. And there's so many examples of this. This just happened to happen today.
We just reported, I mean, we didn't report, but we were talking about the report, I don't know how many weeks ago, where they just totally mowed down those, I believe, ambulances that were clearly marked from above and on the side. And on top of it, they had their lights going to indicate, hey, this is an emergency vehicle. And then on top of all of that, I think the weirdest part of that one to me was burying the vehicles.
The explanation that Israel had, I mean, and that part is what actually nobody can explain, like, successfully, unless you include in the explanation that we target aid vehicles.
I mean, is the aid vehicle Hamas? Is it Herbie? Is that what's happening here?
They were claiming that in that area that they had some kind of intelligence or whatever, that aid vehicles, that Hamas was using aid vehicles to move troops and munitions. Okay. So after they bombed these targets, and killed all these aid workers, then why, after and finding out there were no soldiers or no weapons in there, if you had intelligence about this, and that's your excuse for doing this, then yeah, why did you bring in the bulldozer and bury them?
Yeah,
like, you were obviously hiding it, and then it was
the ambulance is going to come back to life from the grave, and they need to make sure that it doesn't come back.
Right, you need to like bury it and then like surround it with a circle of salt. So I want to back up just a little bit before we and get into these alleged reasons why the GHF was created, because they really are like continuing to make these claims, regardless of all the evidence to the contrary, that this has nothing to do with Israel. This is a completely independent organization, but like it's all above board, totally normal. So Israel says that they advised, it's just an advisory capacity about the creation of the GHF and it was there to prevent Hamas from diverting aid. Yet, they have never ever provided any evidence that that Hamas was seizing aid and diverting it at any point at all.
Evidence is Hamas.
Yeah, the evidence is Hamas. It's all Hamas. Mike Huckabee, ambassador, like we mentioned, loves it, and he also says Israel had nothing to do with setting up the GHF. So they didn't, like, there's an out of syncness here with the talking points, because Israel's like, yeah, we did it, and then the US is like, no, we didn't know, this is like an independent organization, but then Israel's like, yeah, we did it. Like,
what's bizarre to me about it, besides all of that, is why is everybody trying to distance themselves or obfuscate who it is?
I know.
What's the point?
It doesn't make any sense. It's so anyway, yeah, we can get like trapped in this completely. The foundation was established in February 2025 after the U.S. accused Hamas of diverting international aid. That's just basically, that's the official message. Of course, Hamas denies it. The UN representatives have said, no, Hamas has never even done this. It's never happened. It was never an issue. Whenever UNRWA was responsible for delivering aid, it was never an issue. Like, no Hamas soldiers or fighters ever came and like took it. It's yeah. And
the only people who are really a threat here to these aid workers is the fucking Israelis.
Right. That's the only people that it's ever been a threat to them. And, none of the claims about UNRWA have ever been substantiated, other than like in the mildest sort of ways. It's just never been there. But yet,
like the only things that they will attempt to claim that almost have substance, they don't, but it's like substance adjacent, is communicating with Hamas.
Because that was the government.
Because that's the government, and you have to communicate with fucking somebody who's there. And if the only person who picks up the phone when you call the house is Hamas, and there's nobody else picking up the goddamn phone, then you're talking to the guy who's with Hamas. And that's the only thing we're talking about here, which notably, we can look at Trump and the Houthis. Israel got pissed off because they fucking made a deal, but that's the same level of cooperation and what's the word I'm looking for here? collaboration. That's the same level of collaboration that we're talking about here, which is just you're communicating with the people who are there. So in a way, Trump is a Houthi collaborator for talking to the Houthis.
Yeah, and it's not just it's not just us saying this never happened, that the sort of collaboration between Hamas and UNRWA never happened. It literally has been investigated numerous times. And in fact, there was even an Israeli intelligence leak in 2024 that indicated that there was partial corroboration, and this is of individual cases where there was somebody who worked for UNRWA, a staff person, dealing directly with Hamas and coordinating something, not attacks necessarily, just any kind of conversation. But even the Israelis found that there was no systemic UNRWA Hamas coordination. There was a UN Office of Internal Oversight Services report that said there was no cooperation. There was a review by the Colonna report in April 2024 that said nothing happened. The USAID report found no diversion of US-funded UNRWA aid to Hamas. Like, it was just over and over again. But yet we're still talking about the same shit. Like, we just have to keep responding to this.
And these organizations are hardly fucking terrorist sympathizers over here.
I know, like UNRWA, like, come on. I mean, or USAID. I mean, come on. Like, yeah.
Well, USAID is typically providing cover for very different terrorists, right, that are operated by the CIA. I mean, that's a different story.
If anything, you would expect them to find otherwise and say, like, yeah, actually, yeah, Hamas and UNRWA are like, they're like, they're as thick as can be, but they didn't. They didn't. There was nothing. All right. Well, I'm going to keep us moving on here. So unlike the traditional humanitarian setups, the GHF facilities are basically like high security compounds. They had these, like, their whole plan was to set up like these fence lines and sort of like cattle, move people through them and to the aid distribution hub. And also heavily guarded with armed contractors.
Yeah, like, this isn't fucking iron and oak at Coachella here.
Right.
All right.
And then on top of that, they had Israeli troops at the perimeters, which, figures into how things went south basically immediately with their first distribution operation a couple of days ago. So then they had sand berms and military style checkpoints where they were doing ID verification and like biometric identification on people. So something that's really bizarre here isn't all of that other stuff, but it was the cataloging of everybody who showed up to get aid.
That is so fucking bizarre.
So you basically,
I mean, I can understand why they're doing that.
Yeah. Because
the whole thing is not about providing aid in the first fucking
But they're
place.
doing this ID verification to rule out Hamas ties for everybody who shows up. So this is from...
It almost sounds like a fucking Palantir operation.
It really does.
Like if I read that in the next sentence, I mean, I read this article, so it's not. But if I read that in the next sentence, I would be like, oh yeah, of course. It
makes perfect sense that Peter Thiel would have some involvement in this kind of thing. This is from Washington Post. Internal planning documents from November show that even then, this is November of I think it's last year, but it may have actually been as far back as 2023, show that even then the founders of GHF anticipated pushback, this was last year, preparing preemptive talking points in case they encountered allegations likening the food hubs to, quote, concentration camps with biometrics or comparing the organization with Blackwater, former U.S. mercenary firm implicated in violence against civilians in Iraq. I mean, former is like, yeah, they rebranded. It's like, yeah, it's just new names. But as mentioned, as we mentioned up above, their first operation went to shit immediately when they started setting up this food distribution center in southern Gaza at Rafah. And as if he'd seen a vision, Jake Wood, the director of the humanitarian arm of GHF, resigned on May 25th, the day before this operation took place. I mean, like, wow.
Yeah.
And his reasons were that he did not imagine with the model that they were using, and this is his statement, is that they could ever fulfill their, at least on paper, mission to deliver humanitarian aid in Gaza. He didn't see any possibility of doing that, so he resigned.
What's also interesting to me that about Jake Wood resigning is this guy is not some kind of fucking Nobel Peace Prize winner here. The fact that he resigned and was particularly concerned about this going to shit. I can't imagine that he's over here being a fucking pro-Palestinian sympathizer. His participation in this is with the other cohorts who are part of this Israeli regime and part of this occupational force.
Right. Jake Wood, noted member of the Global Hamas Support Network.
HSN. That's what it is. Yeah. HSN.
So, I mean, I don't even know how to say it. Like, it's just fucking awful. On May 27th, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, under Israeli military supervision, they did their first food delivery to thousands of desperate, starving Palestinians, including women and children. And essentially everything fell apart as soon as it started. People started rushing the facility. It led to stampedes, broken fences, and violent clashes as, people were fighting to get access to food. This is from another Washington Post piece. A U.S. and Israeli-backed plan process to distribute aid to the Gaza Strip faced growing criticism Wednesday after scores of Palestinians were wounded across 2 days of deliveries as fearful, desperate crowds thronged locations where food was being handed out, underscoring the scale of the hunger crisis in the besieged and shattered enclave. UN officials said that as many as 50 people appeared to have been shot and injured near the private aid distribution site in the southern city of Rafah's Tel al-Sultan neighborhood Tuesday. And that crowds had overrun the World Food Program distribution site near Deir al-Bala in central Gaza on Wednesday, sacking it for individual bags of flour before themselves being attacked by armed looters. Initial reports indicate 2 people died and several were injured in the tragic incident, the WFP said in a statement. A health official at the nearby Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital, Ayad Amwawi, said later 3 people had been killed. Humanitarian needs have been spiraled out of control after 80 days of complete blockade of all food assistance and other aid into Gaza, the WFP said. Israel has barred nearly all food and medical supplies from entering Gaza since March 2nd, leaving parts of the population on the brink of starvation. The newly launched aid program is run by Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a controversial private organization that began distributing food in Gaza this week. The mechanism is Israeli-approved, secured by private contractors, backed by the United States, and bypasses the UN system for providing relief. So, I read some of this earlier. At a news conference Wednesday, Jonathan Whittall, head of the UN Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, in Gaza, described the first site at which the often distraught and hungry Palestinians had run as a, quote, militarized distribution point established on the rubble of their homes. The newly developed distribution scheme is more than just the control of aid. It is engineered scarcity, Whittall said. The timing and circumstances of the Israeli troops opening fire Tuesday remained unclear. 2 eyewitnesses quoted by the Palestinian Center for Human Rights said that crowds had swelled throughout the day as news of the aid distribution spread, leading Israeli troops to open fire from their positions at Alam Square, about half a mile from the distribution site, around 4:30 local time. Yeah, so Israel says they were firing warning shots that somehow managed to hit 51 people.
Well, they warned them with the bullet in their chest.
Yeah, I mean, warning shots, like the warning shots they fired on all those European diplomats.
Yeah,
except they didn't actually hit any of them. So yeah, predictably, all of this worked out exactly as you'd expect.
It went immediately to shit. Of course it did.
Yeah, I mean, how would you imagine? How would anybody looking at this from the outside imagine that this could ever go off correctly?
And on
Well,
top
I don't
of
know.
it-
Maybe it did go off correctly. Maybe this was like the idea, like they knew that it wouldn't work, and they knew that people would panic if they, if they started shuttling them through these, these fence lines like that, and doing all this scanning, and you got them just starved enough, to absolutely panic. So maybe that was the intention, was to just like to have it go to shit so they could shoot them and say, see, we can't even give them food.
Yeah, you can't even work with these people.
Right.
They're just so untenable. They're a bunch of savages.
They're impossible.
They're totally unruly. Well,
that's
it
pretty
also
much the
occurs-
language that you get out of the Israeli government anyway. Like
in my sarcasm, I'm toning it down from what they say.
yeah, Gavir said something about like referring to them just recently, like the other week, as like half humans or something like that, or human beasts. Like that is the shit that like when you're on Twitter or on Facebook or wherever, and you see posts in Hebrew, go ahead and translate that.
Yeah,
because
it's always fucking gnarly.
It is some
from
of the most,
any one of these officials. And
this is not just some random account. These are like these are official government accounts, and like U.S. Defense or the IDF Twitter account translate this stuff, and it's absolutely heinous. At least 50% of the time.
The things that we get from the diplomacy side of Israel that makes its way across the shores and into American news outlets, by the time it lands on American soil and into English speaking ears, well, I guess your ears don't speak English.
English hearing ears.
You find that it is like a fragment of anything that's being said in or by Israel that is by the time that it gets here. And even that is still fucking heinous. And that's the stuff that is already prepackaged and then packaged again and then refined again for American audiences and through all of the mechanisms of propaganda for the West. And it's still fucking heinous. But if you fucking hear the raw thing, they just say it all the time. They don't sugarcoat it.
No, it's right there. They're just like, oh yeah, nobody speaks Hebrew. Whatever, like it's. And
also they have an arrogant attitude to it as well. They know that the United States has a total consensus in all of the levers of power in the House, in the Senate, in the White House. It's not going to go against Israel. It hasn't gone against Israel in any meaningful way in 30, 40 years. The only time that it did most recently was when the United States made them stop their advance.
That's kind of an interesting angle to all this, because Netanyahu and other Israeli officials have said this, that they can't believe the U.S. has let them go this long, because usually it's like, after some skirmishes and a couple of atrocities here and there, some mass murders, the U.S. government steps in and says, okay, that's enough.
When was the most recent one where they went into the Sinai Peninsula? Which one am I thinking of, Sean?
I'm not sure.
Anyway, that's the one I'm thinking of where the U.S. said, all right, fucking chill out.
But so far, they haven't done that. Nobody's pulled back on the reins and told them to stop. I've heard this talked about, but I'm not sure, it's just people's opinion, but it kind of makes sense that some of the escalation in this, the starvation campaign and the tent fires and things like that Israel has caused, some of that is almost, could almost be explained by we don't know how much longer they're going to let us go. So there's a fervor to it, they built up kind of a lather, and now they're trying to kill as many people as they can before it stops.
They recently relatively recently. Since I love, quick side note, in the New York Times article, at one point it said, what was the phrasing? That's it. That the treaty, or not the treaty, the peace negotiations had collapsed, like it was a flan in a cupboard. It was just sitting there, and it happened all by itself. It just fell inwards. No. Israel broke the fucking ceasefire because they didn't want to continue with it. Meanwhile, Israel's complaining that they're still not getting the hostages back. And of course, but the New York Times just say, "Oh, it collapsed. Whoops. Who knows how it happened? It was an act of God. Nobody was responsible for it." Anyway, in all of this, it seems to me that the entire goal here of trying to create these distribution hubs and set up this scheme of having the private security and the Israeli controlled via U.S. contractors registered in Delaware. And also, wasn't it like Sweden or something was the other, or Switzerland? There was a secondary.
I didn't know about that one, but yeah,
registration of the same name. Either way, it doesn't matter. That the whole fucking point here is similar to how they announce ahead of time that they're going to move into a place, just so that they can say anybody moving is a valid target.
As a target.
I think that what they're attempting to do here is they want to cut off all aid. Not only do they have the blockade happening right now, but I think that they want to make sure that nobody else can go in there. And if they can say, well, we're already providing the aid under our own scheme, so there's no need to allow the UN or anybody else in there. And so therefore we're going to justify it by saying that we've already got it covered. And then of course they will not have it covered. I think that that's the whole operation here.
Yeah. That is the idea, is to be able to claim that they're doing something, because there is still that tacit approval seeking, or at least ass covering that they want to do, as for the Europeans, and for the Democrats, because they want to be able to at least claim that they've done the thing, and that if it went wrong, it's not their fault because they tried.
Yeah.
So on that note, Jules, why don't you give us a segue to our next section here? Because we got another one. We're gonna lighten it up a little bit.
Well, our favorite people, the Democrats, have been up to what does it say here in the notes? Oh, the same thing. The same thing. Again.
What we're talking about now is the Democrats launching a $20 million manhood rescue mission. After realizing,
yeah, they're going to send in security for this rescue mission.
After realizing
that's registered in Delaware,
that young men fled in droves from the Democrats last November, after getting washed by DJT and Elon Musk in 2024, when Trump flipped key battleground states and became the first Republican to win the popular vote since Reagan. The Dems are still scrambling to figure out what the fuck happened and why American men, particularly younger ones, just took off. So their solution is basically they're going to they're planning they're planning to get ready to do a study.
What they're going to do is they're going to create a committee for the creation of the committee that will study the possibility of a committee.
Yes.
To think about sometime in the future, thinking about something.
They're planning on dropping $20 million on this initiative that they're calling Speaking with American Men, a Strategic Plan, or SAM, which I guess is like Uncle Sam, son of Sam.
No. The other thing is this is founded on faulty understanding of the demographic shift. I don't believe that there was any demographic shift. The Democrats, really, actually, everybody in the talking head political sphere keeps railing on this idea that there's this rightward shift. And when you look at the polling in traditionally groups that the Democrats are owed the vote.
Yeah.
They're entitled to the vote from people of color, men, and so forth, women,
people with college degrees.
And there's this idea that there was a shift in this most recent election in the demographics. But what happened more accurately is nobody showed up because nobody there's 100,000 reasons, but it's not necessarily that there's this shift that the people who showed up last time showed up again this time, and they're the same people, but they had a change of heart this time and they went the other way. That's not what fucking happened. It's that nobody was there. It was a hugely smaller percentage of people overall who voted.
Yeah. And
he won the popular vote with a smaller number of people than he got in the previous election where he won with the electoral college.
And I think also something that I'm not really sure how much this figured into it, but it is also the first time in my history of paying attention to elections that I've ever heard this directly. And this is from people that I'm acquainted with, that they voted for the first time this election for Trump. I'd never heard. They
voted for the first time ever, and they voted for Trump, or they voted for the first time for Trump?
They voted for the first time ever so that they could vote for Trump.
Astounding.
And this is the first time, the first election in 2024 that I had ever heard anybody say this. And I've heard it from multiple people. I was on a plane a couple of weeks ago, and the guy sitting next to me told me this. I know that there's a friend's brother-in-law. He told me this. I can think of 5 people just off the top of my head that have said this to me. So I think that there really are some first-time voters who are like never could bother to get off the couch for any reason, in any past election, who showed up for this one. And so I think that the turnout from regular voters was a lot lower, and it was slightly offset by people coming out for the first time for Trump. Now, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just odd to me. I don't have,
it is odd.
I don't have any kind of like polling or whatever. I mean, polls are always suspicious to me anyway, but I can say I have never in my life heard anybody say this is I came out to vote for the first time and I'd never voted before in my life. And I'm in my 50s. The guy sitting next to me on the plane was in his 70s and he'd never voted in his life.
That is so fucking mind-boggling.
I'm like,
I mean, I know that's a huge chunk of the population, but every time I hear of somebody who's never voted, it's a mindfuck for me every time, even though I know statistically that's a lot of people.
Now, there was one of the people I'm thinking of, like, I actually don't know who he voted for because he didn't say, but he did say he voted for the first time, and he's my age. And but I don't know. I think he might have voted for Harris actually, and he was the first time. But I just think that that's interesting that we had these people like who have been burnt out by politics who stayed home because they just was like, what, this shit again, whatever, and then you had this probably smaller group who did show up for the first time because of this election.
The other thing that the Democrats have continued to do for the last 6 months while licking their wounds is always blaming someone but themselves.
And that's where we're at. Anybody else. All right, that's good. And Jules, you got us back on track.
And I wanted to mention before we get too back on track that it's always pointing the finger at the leftists, saying that the leftists won't compromise.
Yeah.
They won't compromise. And if you ask, well, why don't you compromise with the leftists? No, we weren't talking about compromising with you. We meant compromising with the fascists. We just want to move right. We don't ever want to compromise with you on anything reasonable that would actually get us fucking elected, like universal health care or a higher minimum wage or any of the things that are wildly popular.
Yeah, I mean, and I actually I spent some time refreshing my memory about Harris's economic policies and the stuff that she was advocating. She did advocate for a higher minimum wage. That was one of the things that she did speak about occasionally. And, you know, then she had like the $25,000 house, first time home buyer credit, and then a tax break of $10,000 for those same people if they bought a home. That's not nothing, but at the same time, it's just such a scant address.
It's so fucking convoluted,
right?
It's so. I mean, people when you're talking about a line item on your fucking tax return, you've lost everyone. But you've lost everyone that you don't already have. You haven't won anybody.
And I was in a discussion with somebody not too long ago, and I'm not a huge fan of relitigating old past elections, but in this particular case, we were talking about it, and he was telling me like basically the same kind of thing that you were saying right now about blaming somebody else. And it was, the idea that people didn't vote for Harris because they're racist and sexist. And I'm like, come on. I mean, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. So, yeah. I mean, how much is sexism playing into this? And as far as the racist thing, I mean, we could talk about possible this intersectional kind of contact, but for Harris, but Obama won twice. And I'm not sure that we can use this as an explanation for not showing up. I think they just didn't like her. And yeah, and we can't, and we're going to get into a little bit of background about this study and some of the explanation that they're, for them spending $20 million on this. But something that doesn't ever come up still is Gaza. They won't talk about it. They didn't allow,
or they fucking dismiss it like the leftists are complaining again.
They didn't allow the pro-Palestinian speaker at the Democratic National Convention before the last year. They haven't adopted any of that as part of their platform. And in fact, in regards to Israel, Harris just repeatedly doubled down on Biden's foreign policy, and which is okay, there's going to be more of the same. We're not going to, damage our relationship with Israel. And people heard that and were like, well, what's the fucking difference? They was just who gives a shit which one of these wins? It's it would probably, we wouldn't have any of this fiasco, this casino that we're living in now that with Trump, if Harris had won. But it also would have just been more of the same. And I think that drives people crazy.
And on top of it, we wouldn't have Trump if they just ran a candidate that stood for fucking anything. For anything. And before we get back on topic, the only other thing that I wanted to say here was that they keep, as they're pointing the finger at everybody but themselves and doing anything but looking in the fucking mirror for why they could have possibly been losers again, they're fucking droopy dog as an entire party. Well, nobody likes me. I don't know why though.
All right, this is from a Times piece, which is, I think, this is really a pretty astounding article. One longtime Democratic researcher has a technique she leans on when nudging voters to share their deepest, darkest feelings about politics. She asks them to compare America's two major parties to animals. So
what is this? Some sort of fourth grade children's exercise?
What I love about this this article is just how fucking credulous this reporter is. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. They're totally, this writer is totally on board with all of this. any real criticism of it at all. There's no challenging going on.
This sounds like sound science. No notes.
After around 250 focus groups of swing voters, a few patterns have emerged, said researcher Anat Shenker-Osorio. Republicans are seen as apex predators like lions, tigers, and sharks, beasts that take what they want when they want it. Democrats are typically tagged as tortoises, sloths, or slugs, slow, plodding, passive. So Ms. Shenker-Osorio perked up a little this year when a Democratic man in Georgia suggested that a very different kind of animal symbolized her party. A deer, he said, in headlights. And it was like, this is like a mic drop moment for them.
Yeah.
The man had more to say, though. You stand there and you see the car coming, but you're going to stand there and get hit with it anyway.
First of all, he's right.
He is totally right. He's totally right.
He's Hamas.
But you see, they're absolutely fucking powerless to do anything good for anybody because of their donors, because of the donor class. They can't do it. They have too many rich people that they're trying to keep on their side. They can't do things for normal people. There's just no way for them. It is a built-in contradiction.
They shut you out.
It is a built-in contradiction in this party, which is why it's like, who the fuck cares who they run at this point, unless they fix that. You know, Harris had $1 billion in campaign funding, $1 billion,
and they still went over budget,
and they still had to get more money. I like. That's astounding. She spent $1 billion in like 3 months. Communities that Democrats had come to count on for a generation or more, and this is what you're saying, these are the people that owe them their vote. Young people, black voters, Latinos, all veered toward the right in 2024. I mean, kind of. I think there's a question about that still, like you said. Some of them sharply. And unlike Mr. Trump's win in 2016, his victory last year could not be waved away as an outlier after he won the popular vote for the first time. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. The stark reality is that the downward trend for Democrats stretches back further than a single election. Republicans have been gaining ground in voter registration for years. Working class voters of every race have been steadily drifting toward the GOP. That's kind of a fact. I mean, unions, really. Even if the union gives their endorses a particular Democrat candidate, the union membership is still starting to vote much more heavily for Republicans.
And which union was it that actually endorsed Trump on the most recent one? I don't remember, but
it might have been
there
the
was
Teamsters.
At least one. Yeah, it was a big one. Was it the Teamsters?
It might have been the Teamsters.
It was huge.
Yeah.
It wasn't, just one of the locals. It was a big fucking union.
Yeah, it might not have been the Teamsters overall, but it was definitely Teamsters membership that was heavily favoring Trump. I'm not sure, but it sounds right though. I mean, it actually sounds right that there's that's been going on. Let's see. Working class voters of every race have been steadily drifting toward the GOP, and Democrats are increasingly perceived as the party of college-educated elites, the defenders of a political and economic system that most Americans feel is failing them. I mean, who do they have to blame here, though? Because their Democratic strategists, like working closely with party leadership, were actually saying, we don't need young white men.
Yeah.
They specifically said that. We don't need them.
I mean, their whole headline could have just been, fuck them.
Yeah.
We don't need them anyways.
Over a long period of time, our party overdrew our trust account with the American people, said Rob Flaherty, who was deputy campaign minister. Campaign minister. Don't I wish?
The campaign czar.
Campaign manager for former Vice President Kamala Harris last year. So we went from like, this is all toxic masculinity to we got to get their votes. And for years, that's been the Dems playbook. Blame every failure on the voters, like you said. And according to them, the only reason anybody likes Trump is because they're toxic misogynists like him.
And then they turn around and say, but we got to get our own Joe Rogan.
And now they're saying we got to get our own liberal Joe Rogan. And I forget where, where I heard
They
this.
have Pod Save America, which is fucking turd on a stick.
But I forget what comedian said this, but he was saying that, like, his whole bit was like, every podcast is the liberal Joe Rogan. There's so few that aren't the liberal Joe Rogan. Every one of them. And and then he goes into this whole bit about, like, talking about how they make cheese at this little artisanal shop in Wisconsin or something. And that's every podcast.
So tell me more about sweaty balls. Are they?
But this toxic masculinity thing has been a talking point for Democrats for the last 2 years. Yeah, like the Newsom blamed all the mass shootings on toxic masculinity. I mean, and if you ever pay like just a little bit of attention, you don't need to read their manifestos, but just learn about some of these people that have perpetrated these mass shootings. These are complicated scenarios. These people have complicated worldviews.
Well, their worldviews are a fucking grab bag of ideas.
And that's what I mean, is that they're
every fucking time. There's no coherent ideology for one of them.
None of them. And you see all of these contradictions. And so inside their worldviews, where you have a Latino man who has a Nazi ideology, or the boy in Tennessee who shot up his high school, who's black and was advocating a Nazi ideology in his manifesto that he released right before he did that.
Say what you will about Explosive Teddy. He had a coherent ideology. I'm not saying I agreed with his ideology, but it was consistent and based on extensions from assumptions about life and society and models of the world.
Yeah.
And if this is true, then that.
And, so you can't just say toxic masculinity and just explain it and just say you're done, that it's all over.
On the note of Gavin Newsom, that's another example of this kind of Democrat thinking where it's always a rightward shift and it's always placating and pandering to this imaginary mythical fucking center, which really just means how can I be more right and still call myself a Democrat? There's real fucking problem of that in Seattle and places like Seattle, where every fucking candidate here basically has to be ostensibly Democrat. And then you have people like, I don't remember which one it was, but there's this local city councilor who owns Fremont Brewery. And she's a total fucking asshole, and she's basically a Republican, but she has to put on this ostensible liberal air to everything. Or the mayor Harrell, also ostensibly a Democrat, but then he and the whole fucking city council talks about how much they want to give more money to cops, even though we're in a fucking budget deficit. The point being with Gavin Newsom, it's that same thinking where he has his stupid fucking podcast and he's inviting right wingers on. And then I don't remember who it was, if it was Shapiro or some other dickhead, that he's nodding along with him and saying, yeah, fuck those trans athletes. Good idea. Like, what the fuck, dude? What's the point of being the party of defending all of these marginalized groups if you don't ever fucking defend them in the first place?
No, that's the thing, is like, you just say the thing. I said it. I said that we should defend them. I said it. I never did anything to actually defend them, but I said we should. And now, after losing all these people that are finally, just tired of them and like having them talking out of both sides of their mouth and never following through, suddenly like they want to do a study so that they can listen and understand them. So I'm gonna get back to, because it just gets better. The SAM project is going to include focus groups, polling, targeted messaging to win back male voters, and after years of alienating them and realizing that they actually need them after all. So this is one more part from that Times piece. There is fear, there is anxiety, and there are very real questions about the path forward, all of which I share, said Representative Jason Crow, a Colorado Democrat who is charged with recruiting candidates to help Democrats win back the House in 2026. We are losing support in vast swaths of the country, in rural America, in the Midwest, and places where I'm from, Mr. Crow continued. People that I grew up with who now support Donald Trump, who used to be Democrats. There's no reason why we shouldn't have the support of these folks other than we have pushed in so many ways these people away from our party. And finally, the big solution. For now, Democratic donors and strategists have been gathering at luxury hotels to discuss how to win back working class voters. Commissioning new
We're gonna have $1 million plate dinners to figure out why the working poor don't like us.
Again,
and we're gonna ask our rich donors what they think on the subject.
Forming the committee to commission the study. Commissioning new projects that can read like anthropological studies of people from faraway places. All right, here's where it gets slightly critical. The prospectus for one new $20 million effort obtained by the Times aims to reverse the erosion of Democratic support among young men, especially online. It is codenamed SAM, short for Speaking with American Men, a Strategic Plan, and promises investment to, quote, study the syntax, language, and content that gains attention and virality in these spaces.
They want to study how to talk to the people and not how to have content as part of your word. They just want to figure out what the words are. They want to not how to have any content behind those words.
No substance, no sincerity, no nothing. They just want to figure out that right combination of words to reverse engineer virality, something that has been shown over and over to be impossible to do.
How do you do, fellow kids? What is the hip new thing?
The hip new thing is it recommends buying advertisements in video games, among other things.
Oh, wow. You know, I just learned that I'm going to be part of the Democratic Party because I saw this on Call of Duty.
Above all, we must shift from a moralizing tone, it urges. So the video game thing has been done before, though, but not in such a small scale with advertising. The U.S. Army commissioned a video game called America's Army. And it was this like, basically it was a skirmish type model and it was completely free. All you had to do was download it. And you join up and basically like you'd have like whoever else was like, you know, whatever server you joined, the people that were automatically dumped with you in this little unit. And then you would start off and all of it. I mean, half the game was in like some computer version of some Afghani town, you know, like, and you'd be part of the U.S. Army and you have your weapons and whatever and different jobs and you'd run, you know, you just like go and like work your way across the board until you came across the opposing team. And
level 3 mission, get all the wrong colored people.
Well, here's the thing. Whatever side you joined on, you were the U.S. Army. Whatever side the other group that was randomly like clumped together as a team, they were terrorists with black balaclavas on. But to them, they were the U.S. Army and you were the terrorists.
It's what's that movie where the guy has the glasses and he can see the aliens that
they live.
They live. There we go.
Above all, we must shift from a moralizing tone, it urges. Mr. Trump's diminishing...
Quit wagging your finger, they say. Yeah, no shit.
Mr. Trump's diminishing popularity since the election has some Democrats already salivating for the midterm elections. Republicans control the House only narrowly, 220 to 212, with 3 vacancies and heavily Democratic seats. Trump's numbers seem to be getting worse and worse, and I'm pretty optimistic Democrats will have some real opportunities in 2026, said Zach McCrary, a Democratic pollster. But again, your opportunities are all, I hate Trump. This went to shit immediately.
Yeah.
Oh, did you hear about the nickname? Trump's nickname?
Taco?
Yes. I loved it. He got asked
and when the reporter asked him, that's a nasty question.
It's a very unfair question. It's very mean.
And then fucking 10 questions later, when we were way off the topic, it was still sticking in his craw. And he brought it up again and said and railed against her again.
He's like, they definitely think I'm very strong. Definitely not a chicken. So yes, taco stands for. It is evidently it's the nickname that Wall Street traders have come up with for Trump. It stands for Trump always chickens out, and it's in regards to.
Let's get Peter Griffin in here and find out. Put him to the test.
It's in regards to Trump. Pushing all these tariffs and then backing out of them the last minute.
And he even said, because I went from 140% to 100% and then also lower than that. That made like, yeah, that's actually, you got it.
Figured it out.
That's exactly it.
But Mr. McCrary, who lives in an Alabama congressional district, is often ranked the nation's most conservative. Caution taking the wrong lessons from any successes in 2026 because he said the party's brand is repellent in so much of the country. In the 2022 midterms masked the Biden problem, he said of the former president's age. A good 2026 midterm, we should not let that mask a deeper problem. He added that Democrats had lost credibility by being seen as alien on cultural issues. But that's them, like rolling back on rolling back that kind of wokeism mentality and thinking that like the reason they don't like us is because we're too woke. And it's like, no, you have no material policies that benefit people.
The same fucking thing happened in Seattle again, with after the major protests in, I want to say 2020, for Black Lives Matter, and there was that occupation of the area just adjacent to the police precinct in basically Seattle's neighborhood, and there was never, not once, there was never any substantial rollback of police funding, never, not once. Meanwhile, after that, city council used that as an opportunity. All of the fucking councilors and the shithead mayor used that as the opportunity to say, well, we tried it. You didn't try it though. You didn't do anything. Well, we tried it. And what we found is that there's just more crime now than ever. So what we got to do is reverse course and go the other way and give cops more money. You never took their money. You never defunded them. But they point to the slogan of defund, of talking about it as the thing that happened that didn't work. But you never defunded them.
You never did.
It's the same fucking thing with the Democratic Party. You never actually, God, I hate the term woke so fucking much. I know. But you actually never did anything for any of the marginalized groups in the first fucking place. So to say that it didn't work, the nothing didn't work, the nothing that you did.
Yeah, and then they're not offering anything to anybody. There's nothing real. I mean, you have Bernie and AOC going out there. They're saying some things. And I'm totally on board. I mean, Bernie has clearly shown that he has some problems, and he's not what I hoped he would be, especially in regards to Israel. AOC, same thing. But they still represent a whole lot better of an option than anybody else. And you see how popular their oligarchy tour has been, and you see how little mainstream Democrats have jumped on that bandwagon. They have absolutely. They haven't provided any even vocal support, let alone material support for that effort. They're not showing up to go speak. They're not doing anything. The
Hakeem Jeffries 24 and some change hour-long speech.
No, that wasn't him. That wasn't Hakeem Jeffries. That was Cory Booker.
Oh, Cory Booker, motherfucker. Well, either way, Cory Booker's speech it totally personifies the Democratic Party, where he spent 24 hours. It wasn't a filibuster to prevent the Republicans from doing anything.
It wasn't.
He didn't say anything. He just wanted to break the Strom Thurmond record.
Yeah. That's it. He spent
24 hours. He didn't stop anything. It wasn't even ostensibly to stop anything.
24 hours talking,
it was just to talk
and not doing anything.
and not doing anything.
And now he's going to write a
Great job.
Gonna write a fucking book.
You're record breaking at doing nothing.
He's going to write a fucking book about it now.
Of course he is.
I mean, it's crazy.
I'm sure it's going to be as bloviated and full of shit as the 24 hours of saying nothing.
And regardless of this sort of, this sort of self-cautioning that you hear from from this guy about the not taking the results of a 2026 win, a midterm election win as, for granted, they're going to take it for granted. They're going to see it as a mandate or some kind of referendum against Trump if they do get it. And there's a really good chance that could happen because a lot of people are totally freaked out by, realizing that we now live in a casino, and they probably will vote for Democrats.
It's also super duper fucking common for the midterm to flip parties from
that's
the
what I'm saying.
I mean, it's almost expected.
It's probably going to happen
historically.
Yeah, it's probably going to happen. There's a really good chance of it, at least. And they will absolutely do no reflection. They'll just take it as a win. Oh, they like us. They really like us after all. Or
if they lose, then they're going to fucking blame the leftists and black men.
All the same things.
Pick a thing.
Yeah.
Pick a fucking thing.
Misogyny, from black men is why Harris didn't get elected, because they didn't vote for her as much as they thought they were, as much as they were supposed to. And it's I think that I think that Bernie's example is something that they just keep overlooking, because in 2016, he performed his best in some Republican states during the primaries. I mean, he beat out Clinton. I mean, these aren't high electoral states, but still, he beat out Clinton in the primary in Nebraska, in Kansas.
Well, in the oligarchy, tour,
maybe not Kansas.
They're fucking packing the place in places like the most rural, ostensibly red places throughout the country. They're fucking packing them with. And
I think notably, though, he won more votes from the under 30 crowd than Trump and Clinton combined.
Yeah,
I'm but they just they refuse to see that. They refuse to see that his vaguely leftist policies are more popular than anything that that anybody else has on offer.
I will never stop beating the dead horse that Bernie would have won.
He would have.
We wouldn't have had Trump in the first time. We wouldn't have had Trump in the second time. We wouldn't have any of this.
No, I mean,
if they hadn't kneecapped him and cheated and done everything in their fucking power to make sure that he didn't win.
The bizarre DNC primary system with these super delegates that somehow can just
which was created after McGovern, like we've talked about in previous episodes.
Absolutely, because exactly. Yeah, I mean, we have talked about that somewhere at some point,
Well, it was when we were talking about the 1968 the DNC that was also in Chicago.
Exactly, yes.
And they got fucking trounced by Nixon. And then you look at the map of Nixon's win and you look at the map of Reagan's wins, it's the whole country is red and you see a couple of freckles of blue. It's fucking mind-boggling.
And it's clearly not real. Clearly. All right, everybody. I think that's good. I think we're going to leave it there. No, as always, no solution.
Everything is still bad.
It's all still bad. Everything is still bad. Don't go outside.
Everything is terrible.
Just stay in your house. Don't talk to anybody. No, talk to everybody.
If you
talk to everybody,
if you're able to hibernate, go ahead and do that.
Seriously, if you can go to sleep,
if you're a turtle, just get underneath the ground.
I heard somebody say they were talking about they were talking about Trump and minimizing how bad it was. I mean, and the guy was saying at the time, it was a month ago, and he was saying I mean, it's already been a year. It's not that bad, and it was no, dude,
it's been 3 months.
At the time, it had been 3.5 months. So the time dilation is real. We are entering the singularity because it seems like it has been a whole lot long. I guess it's the reverse singularity, but it seems like it has been.
I already feel spaghettified.
At this point, it has been 6 months. Actually, I mean, since he took office, it's been 5 months, basically 5 months and a few days. And this is what it looks like.
What a fucking nightmare.
Just wait for the next 3.5 fucking years.
No. This is just a fever dream. This is a drug-induced malaria fever dream.
All right. We will see you later. Don't forget to subscribe on Patreon. We're going to come back next week with our next installment of Cold as Ice. And
part 4 of 17.
Part 4 of 17. Yeah. This will likely be the last one, but no promises, because as we go forward, they keep expanding. So it's like the opposite of Zeno's paradox. You never reach the end. Of course, rate and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever else. Share an episode on social. And if you do that, make sure to let us know so that we can thank you. And you can
tag us.
You can find us on Twitter and Blue Sky.
We're on Blue Sky.
And just track us down and let us know that you rated us or reviewed us or that you shared an episode or whatever. All right, we'll see you next time.
Later, skaters.